Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is meteorologist Joe Rayo. We're doing this at 8 minutes after 12 noon on Wednesday, the 15th of July. Let me point out, in a meteorological sense, today's a kind of an interesting day. This is St. Swithin's Day, and according to the legend of St. Swithin, if it rains today, it'll rain for 40 more days. If it's fair and dry today, it'll be fair and dry for the next 40 days. That, according to the legend of St. Swithin. I have no clue whether or not, if it rains and it also is bright and sunny, that's what we're going to have for the next 40 days or so. But in any case, I never really believed the legend or lore, but always used to bring it up when I was on television about the legend of St. Swithin. But this is not a meteorological discussion. What we're going to be talking about here today is what I'm calling a primer on an astronomical subject, something that has been in the news of late, although quite frankly, I think it's actually been given short shrift by the mainstream media, but it is out there and a lot of people have seen it. And if you haven't seen it already, hopefully before this little session has ended, you will get a chance in the coming days ahead to see it. I'm talking about the new comet, Comet NEOWISE. And if that sounds like a rather weird name, it's because this particular comet was discovered by a spacecraft, the space probe, out in space. The probe is used to scan the skies 24/7 to look for possible asteroids that may come precariously close to our planet Earth. And the word or the name NEOWISE is actually an acronym. NEO is for Near Earth Orbit. I'm not quite sure what the WISE is, but I don't have the specific breakdown of terms here in front of me, but this is the way things have gone now for the last several years. In fact, more than just several years. It used to be back in the 19th and 20th and early 21st century that if you wanted to discover a comet, you would get your telescope out, scan the skies until you came across something that didn't match on what was on your star charts or star atlases. And if the thing moved, if it was a little fuzzy, blur, you perhaps had caught a comet on its way in toward the sun. And if you were the first one to sight it, and if indeed was a new object, a new comet, your name would be attached. As many as 3 names could be attached to a comet. However, in recent years, with the robotic telescopes all around the world that are scanning the skies for possible asteroids that may come close to the Earth, and also spacecraft that are doing the same thing out in space. It is the space probes and the robotic telescopes that have been discovering comets. It doesn't give the average person a chance anymore to discover these things because the space probes, these robotic telescopes, they can find a comet when it's way, way out and very, very dim, long before it might be visible to an amateur astronomer's telescope. And so more and more in recent years, we have been seeing comets discovered not by people, but by robots or space probes, and NEOWISE is just one example of that. Now, on your screen right now, you could see the orbit of Comet NEOWISE. It is inclined quite a bit to the plane of the planets. This is obviously the solar system. We see the planet orbits out to Mars. Here's Mars, Earth, Venus, and Mercury. And unlike the planets, which travel around the sun in basically the same plane, this particular comet has come up from the plane or below the plane of the planets, up from the south. In fact, initially, for the first half of the time that it was visible, the only places that you could see the comet from was south of the equator, from the southern hemisphere. The comet was positioned in constellations that are not readily visible or not readily accessible to us here in the northern hemisphere or in the latitude, let's say, of New York. But once the comet reached a point where it was passing close to the sun, and it passed closer to the sun on the 3rd of July, it pierced the orbital plane of the planets, went to the north, and became visible to us. In fact, it was visible in a particular space probe's view, the SOHO spacecraft, which always watches the sun for solar activity. And we were able to see the comet before it arrived at the sun during the final week of June, and we noticed that the comet was developing quite nicely and becoming rather bright. Then the comet swept around the sun on July the 3rd. Now it is going back down southward, but it's going to take a while for it to go back below the plane of the solar system. In fact, it's going to not do that for a number of weeks to come, and is now readily accessible to all of us here in the Northern Hemisphere. And as I said, many people have had a chance to see it. If you have not had a chance to see it, well, we will be showing you more information about it with the passage of time here. I want to show you a video. This video was made back in the 1960s. In fact, 1960, the Canadian Film Board made this particular video of a comet, actually of various celestial objects. It was, in fact, a movie that won a number of awards. It was called Universe. And again, it was made back in around 1960, and it shows a number of wonderful images. I just want to show you the image that, or the video that shows you a comet. This view that you see right now is the view that is imagined from the planet Pluto. Actually, the former planet Pluto, the dwarf planet Pluto now. Pluto, of course, about 4 billion miles away from the sun, and from that distance, the sun would appear as nothing more than a very brilliant star in the sky, nothing like what we see from here on the Earth. But also, the realm of Pluto, and even beyond the orbit of Pluto, billions of miles beyond the orbit of Pluto, is where the comets come from. Comets may be nothing more than remnants or leftovers from the formation of the solar system. In fact, the comets locked out there in extreme cold, close to absolute zero, with temperatures of minus 457 degrees below zero Fahrenheit. It is from this area, this region of space beyond the outskirts of the solar system, that comets come from. There may be a huge cloud of comets, maybe numbering in the millions or even billions. And these objects, when they come out from the outer realm of the solar system, move into the inner solar system. And as they do, they are attracted by, again, the gravitation of the sun. They are nothing more than, well, the great expert on comets, a gentleman by the name of Dr. Fred Whipple, back in the 1950s, defined them as dirty snowballs. They're no more than a few miles across, but they are coated with volatile gases, gases such as methane, ammonia, water vapor, and others, mixed with meteoric particles. And again, Dr. Whipple described it as a dirty snowball, although really the size may be more like that of an iceberg. Anyway, as we start the video, we talk about, again, the realm of the comets, where these objects come from far, far out in space. Now we're going to see a comet as it begins to move in toward the sun. Comets, as I said, originate from far out. And this particular view here, there you see the comet approaching. And as it gets within the realm of, let's say, the planet Mars or closer to the Earth, it begins to get affected by the heat of the sun, and it develops this long tail. Now, actually, comets have two tails, a gas tail, which you see here. As the comet gets closer to the sun, the solar wind, the stream of electrified subatomic particles coming out from the sun, blows some of the gases back from the head to form the tail. But not just gas, but also, as I mentioned earlier, there's a dust involved, and that dust too is blown back beyond the comet head to form that beautiful tail. This again is a view of the gas tail here. And the comet, the larger comets, as they approach the sun, become quite bright. Now, this is the case with NEOWISE. NEOWISE is a comet with a larger than average nucleus, and it is going to be sweeping around the sun, as you see here. And right now, the comet has blossomed. The comet has become very bright, and has indeed become one of the bright objects in the sky. Actually, as far as most comets are concerned, most comets don't get very bright. Most comets, and believe it or not, there are about 10 or 12 comets in the sky right now, but you don't see them. You're not aware of them because most comets usually don't get very bright. They usually need either very large binoculars or even a good telescope to see them. And when you see them through a telescope, they don't look like very much. They look like little balls of fuzz, diffuse, hazy balls of light in the sky through the telescope. Comet NEOWISE being a larger than normal comet, several miles across, the nucleus is, and the fact that it made a rather close approach to the sun and was excited, the sun excited the gases and dross, if you will, of the comet to a degree so that it became much brighter than most comets do, came within 27 million miles of the sun back on the 3rd of July. Now it's moving away. As I said, this is about where it was on July the 3rd. Now it's about here in its orbit and will continue to move away. And the comet is actually making a close approach to the Earth. It will approach to within about 63 million miles of the Earth on July 21st. So while it's moving away from the sun, it's moving closer to us, and that's kind of compensating for the trek away from the sun. Normally, comets get dimmer as they move away from the sun, but the fact that the comet is moving away from the sun but now closer to us kind of compensates for that. And so the comet has been more or less shining at the same brightness now for the last week or 10 days and will continue to do so probably until the comet gets nearest to us on the 21st or 22nd of July. Then the comet will gradually fade out and become visible again only in binoculars and telescopes when we get on into August. Now, I'm going to show you a view here of what we would be looking for. This is a view taken. I'm going to move the clock back a little bit. This is a special computer program called Starry Night Pro, which gives a chance for us to see celestial objects at any time, any place. And what I want to do is I want to move this so that we're able to see or give you an idea of what to look for in the sky if you're looking for the comet tonight or in the coming nights ahead. I'm going to zoom forward here. And what you're seeing on your screen right now is a view, I hope what you're seeing on the screen right now, is a view of the comet. But also, I want to show you how you can find the comet in the nighttime sky. Now, the first prerequisite for looking for this comet is that you get to an area that's rather dark. Now, if you're watching right now and you live in a bright urban location, let's say, for example, the city of Yonkers, or especially a big urban location like New York, you're not, I don't think, going to have very much luck in seeing the comet, partially because of the fact that you need a clear, unobstructed view toward the northwest. You can see here, this is looking toward the northwestern part of the sky, and you need to be in an area far from any bright lights. The further away you are from bright lights, the better. The darker your skies will be, and the better your chances of seeing this comet for yourself. Sadly, we live in an era of light pollution, and a lot of these cities, even a lot of suburban locations now, have bright lights which preclude you from seeing a lot of stars in the sky. So that is the thing. If you want to see this comet to its best or fullest extent, my advice would be to find a place where you have an unobstructed northwestern sky, and also find a spot where it is nice and dark. Now, I live in a rather nice, relatively dark area up in Putnam County, 50 miles or so north of Midtown Manhattan. Still, my western sky, or my southern sky, I should say, looking back toward Westchester County and down toward New York City, has this glary look. You could see the light glare coming up from New York and Westchester. Looking toward the north and northwest, it's a bit darker for me, but still, I had to find a location to see the comet, because from where I live, I'm surrounded by tall trees and hills, and that did not help. If I was trying to see the comet, which is rather low in the northwest sky at around 9:30 or so, that wouldn't have helped. So I had to find a location. I did. There was a baseball field only a couple of tenths of a mile away from where I live. I just packed my equipment, my binoculars in the car, traveled a short way away from my home, and went to the baseball field, where it has a nice wide open view, pretty much like what you see here, and was able to have a good clear view off toward the northwest, where at around 9:30, I was able to get a good view last night of Comet NEOWISE. There it is right there. And the tail pretty much that you see here is pretty much the way the tail would look in the sky. But again, not as conspicuous as what you see here. You see, even though the comet right now shines with what astronomers call a magnitude of +2. +2 is roughly the brightness of Polaris, the North Star. That's a pretty bright or fairly bright star, but it doesn't look that bright in the sky because the comet's brightness is spread out from the head and on across the tail. So that brightness of +2 spread out makes the comet appear a bit dimmer and a bit fuzzier and more diffuse to the eye than what you'd be able to see. The really brilliant comets, the spectacular comets, and there have been brilliant comets in the past. Comet Hale-Bopp, for example. There was a comet in 1976, Comet West. There was another one in 1970, Comet Bennett, and one with the brightest tail that I've ever seen in 1965, Comet Ikea-Seki. That comet literally grazed the sun and became very, very bright because it came so near to the sun. But those are what we call great comets. Those are the comets that you need only step outside and look into the sky, and the comet literally calls attention to itself. Oh, look at that. That is not what Comet NEOWISE is. Comet NEOWISE, by the standards of most comets, is a very bright comet. Again, unlike those little fuzzy balls that you need to see with a big telescope, Comet NEOWISE is available with the naked eye, but it's just simply not very bright. It's not going to, you're not going to immediately look around and say, oh, look at that. But if you do look in the northwestern sky, low toward the horizon at around 9:30, you will see, or you will at least get a feel of something out there that's not usual, nothing that resembles a star, but rather a fuzzy star with a long appendage behind it, or a relatively conspicuous appendage behind it. That would be the tail. Now, here is a way that you can find the comet using the star patterns. Up here, we have the Big Dipper. Again, I apologize. This particular program, when you point toward a specific star, it gives you all kinds of information about the star. But what I'm trying to do here is I want to show you how you can find the comet tonight, if it's clear, tonight, the 15th of July, using the Big Dipper. Here's the Big Dipper, the 7 stars that form the Big Dipper, 4 stars making up the bowl, and 3 stars making up the handle. These stars, by the way, let me raise the camera just a little bit. These stars have names: Dubhe, Merak, Phecda, Migres, Alioth, Mizar, and Alkaid. These are the 7 stars that make up the Big Dipper. If you are in the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts, you certainly are aware of them, especially if you wanted to get a merit badge in astronomy. Now, the way that you find the comet using the Big Dipper is you look for the bowl of the Big Dipper. See, here's the bowl right here. Use the bottom 2 stars in the bowl. This is Merak and Phecda. You don't need to know the names, but at least find the bowl of the Big Dipper. Use the 2 stars in the bottom of the bowl, and then you stretch a line out from the 2 stars, an imaginary line from Phecda to Merak, and then you stretch that line down toward the horizon. And when you do that, you should come to the comet. In fact, let me show you again. Here are the 2 stars in the bowl. We stretch that line down. Bingo. You come to Comet NEOWISE. Again, low. This particular view, now this is at 9:37 according to the clock on my screen here. The comet at 9:37 is just about 5 degrees above the horizon. Your fist, if you make a fist, and then you hold the fist out at arm's length, that is 10 degrees. Put the bottom of your fist on the horizon, the top part of your fist would be 10 degrees. So at about 9:37 tonight, Comet NEOWISE is going to be about a half a fist above the horizon. That's rather low, but again, that's why the importance of finding a place that has a clear, unobstructed view of the northwest sky. Now, I want to show you something interesting. In the nights to come, during the next week or so, at 9:37, I'm going to actually move the clock back a little bit, back to 9:30. In the nights to come, you're going to see the comet get higher in the sky at 9:30, because as we move through the next week, the comet is going to get higher and higher in the northwestern sky. So here's how it is at on the 15th of July at 9:30. Let's move it to tomorrow night. This is the 16th. of, whoops, let's see. Whoops, the comet is gone. Ha! That's because I moved it to 2019. Here we go. This is 2020. Let me, kind of playing around with the numbers here. Here we go. I'm going to move this now from the 15th of July. Actually, let me move it back a little bit. The comet only became visible in the evening sky during the last few nights because here's the view on July 11th at 9:30. Here's the view on the 12th at 9:30. Here's the view on the 13th, the 14th, the 15th. Do you get what I'm saying here now? As we move along in time in the coming days ahead, the comet is going to be appearing higher and higher in the sky in the northwest. July 16th, July 17th, the 18th, the 19th, the 20th. Now the comet is no longer just 5 degrees above the horizon. The 20th, the 21st, the 22nd. By July the 22nd, the night when the comet is closest to the Earth, the comet is what now? The comet, instead of being 5 degrees above the horizon, is going to be, let's see if I can get this to work here. Come on, let's go. Here we go. So on the 22nd of July at 9:30, the comet is not 5 degrees up. It's going to be about 20 degrees high in the sky, much higher in the sky. So in the nights that are going to come our way, with each night, the comet is going to get a couple of degrees higher in the sky, and it'll be a lot easier to find in the northwestern sky by the time we get to the end of this week and on into this upcoming weekend. And notice also that with the passage of time, the comet's tail also is going to change its orientation. Right now, the comet, let me back up to tonight, or even to last night. The comet right now, the tail looks like it's oriented from the head of the comet to the upper right. But in the nights to come, as it gets higher in the sky, the comet is also going to see that tail become oriented more and more until finally by the 22nd, it's going to be, that'll be what? That'll be next Wednesday when the comet is closest to the Earth. The comet is going to have its tail pointing almost directly straight up. So we are going to have views of it again over the next week or so. Again, the comet basically will be at around second magnitude, but again, you really need a dark sky to see it to its fullest extent. Now, if you have binoculars, train them on the comet, and you'll get a much better view of it with the binoculars as opposed to the view that you're getting with the naked eye. In fact, we can make believe here. Let me move the sky a little bit so that this way we have a much better view. So if you have binoculars, let's say 7-power binoculars, you will have you'll be able to appreciate the comet a bit more than with the naked eye. Not only will the binoculars make it larger, but it will also make the comet appear brighter because the binoculars, the objective lenses, the big part of the binoculars, the large size, you're looking through the eyepiece and then you're looking out, and those objective lenses are about 35 to 50 millimeters wide, and they are serving to drink in the light so that it allows you to see not just objects larger, but also allow you to see fainter objects in the sky. So with a pair of 7-power binoculars, the comet will look a lot better to you. Now, I have a 7-power binoculars, but I also have big binoculars that are much too large to hold in your hand. I have to mount these binoculars on a sturdy tripod, and they magnify 25 power. Again, most binoculars magnify to 7 power. These binoculars magnify to 25 power. Now, you could also use a small telescope magnifying to about 20 or 25 power in such an optical system, big binoculars or a small telescope. The comet would look much like this. Again, let me move this forward here. You would get a much better view. To me, in the 25-power binoculars, this is kind of like what I saw last night. And let me tell you that while it may not look very spectacular to the eye, in a good pair of binoculars, or especially a small telescope magnifying with low power, 20 or 25 power, the comet looks really, really beautiful. In fact, it looks in binoculars or a small telescope like a great comet in miniature. In other words, when you use binoculars or a small telescope on Comet NEOWISE, looking through the eyepiece, it kind of looks, or at least kind of reminds me, of some of the great comets that I've seen in the past with the naked eye. Like, for example, if you saw Comet Hale-Bopp, or if you saw Comet West or Comet Bennett, some of the bright comets of the past, with the naked eye, looking at NEOWISE with a good pair of binoculars or a telescope would remind you of that. So you could really get the most out of seeing this comet if you have, again, dark skies, a good pair of binoculars, or a small telescope. That would really give you a great view of this comet in the coming days and nights to come. Now, I want to show you a couple of pictures of the comet that have been taken. First off, I want to show you a picture that was taken. This was taken by my daughter and a friend of hers, Jermaine Fergus, from the area around Kerhonkson. How many of you have ever been to Kerhonkson? It's not too far from New Paltz and the town of Accord. This is up in the lower to mid Hudson Valley area. This was taken by them last night. I was seeing the comet from my viewpoint in Putnam County. Now, admittedly, a little bit deceptive because a camera can really bring out the brightness of a comet, makes it appear brighter than what it appears like to the eye. But in spite of the low-hanging clouds near the horizon, there you see quite plainly the comet head, the diffuse comet head, and the appendage, the tail that stretches back from the head of the comet. Also, I need to point out to you the fact that this was taken at about 9:30 last night, maybe actually earlier. In fact, I suspect it was even earlier, maybe more like 9:15, because as you could see, the northwest sky was still rather bright in twilight. At about 9:30, the twilight has really begun to fade, and you get to see the comet against a darker sky, and it's a little bit easier for you to see. If you want to, if you have a good iPhone or a good a smartphone, you probably, if you can, even if you just can barely see the comet, if you aim the iPhone toward the comet, you probably would end up in taking a picture of the comet, ending up with an image very much like this. Again, it's a little deceptive because the comet doesn't really appear quite that bright. But if you look carefully, you could see not only the head, but the initial part of the tail, which is like a few degrees long. But if you look really carefully, you could see the tail stretching all the way back to about this far, maybe like 5 or 6 or 7 degrees. Now, this is the dust tail. The tail, the brightest tail, is the tail that's composed of dust because dust is a good reflector of light. I want to show you a picture of the comet taken last night by a professional photographer. This is a truly outstanding picture. This was a picture that was taken from Europe, actually, but I want to show you that this picture shows you a number of different things. Number one, it shows you the orange of the twilight glow that's receding now as we get deeper into the night. It also shows you not just the dust tail of Comet NEOWISE, but also a second tail. This is the gas tail. Now, the gas tail is much dimmer than the dust tail. The gas tail is created by ionized gas. It appears bluish in color, but it's much, much dimmer than the comet. It can only be brought out really with a long exposure photograph. You see that dust tail here. If this comet were primarily made of just gas, this comet really wouldn't be all that much to look at. What makes this comet spectacular is the fact that after it rounded the sun, it released a lot of dust. And this dust, as I said, which is a good reflector of sunlight, reflecting that sunlight back to the earth, creating this gorgeous tail that you see here, which is quite evident to the eye, to the naked eye, even without binoculars or a telescope. And that is what made this Comet NEOWISE, a showpiece in our evening sky. Really a beautiful sight. And like I said, if you have a telescope, a small telescope, don't use high power necessarily. If you have a telescope, 20 or 30 power will more than suffice to give you a great view of both the head and the tail. And with binoculars of 7 power, you get a nice view of, again, the head and the tail too, although the magnification is not as great and the comet won't look as large, but it still is a beautiful sight. Comets like this do not come along very often. In fact, a comet along the lines of the brightness of a NEOWISE comes along about maybe 2 or 3 times every 10 to 15 years. For us, this is the best comet that we have had available to us since Hale-Bopp. Now, that goes back 23 years to 1997. But this comet, Comet NEOWISE, in our sky now and will continue to remain conspicuous or relatively conspicuous for about the next week or so, at least up until the 22nd, when the comet, again, is closest to the Earth. By all means, if you really want to see something interesting, try to get to a spot where it's nice and dark and bring along, again, binoculars or a small telescope. Look toward the northwestern part of the sky, and you will see this comet low in the northwest. And again, with each passing night from now through, again, the middle of next week, the comet will be getting a little higher in that northwestern sky. Now it's only about, as I said, 9:30, 5 or 6 degrees above the horizon. By this time next week, at about 9:30, the sky will be maybe a touch darker, and we'll also see the comet noticeably higher in the sky, more like 20 degrees high. So it should be a little easier to see because it will be higher up and again against a somewhat darker sky. Again, this view that you see here, taken with a long exposure photograph, bringing out the two tails of the comet. Not likely that you're ever going to see this faint blue ion or gas tail, but certainly the dust tail, which seemingly is getting longer and more conspicuous night by night, in part because you're getting closer to the comet, and also because the comet is still releasing lots of dust in the wake of its close passage to the sun back on July the 3rd. So I hope that you have a chance to see this. Again, it's an evening object. It's also visible in the morning. If you care to get up at about 3:30 a.m., the comet is visible low in the northeastern sky, but the comet is getting, it's an interesting balance, so to speak. With each night, the comet is getting higher and easier to see in the evening sky in the northwest. With each passing morning, the comet is getting lower in the northeastern sky, and by this time next week, you won't be able to see the comet in the morning anymore. And it's always difficult to get up at 3:30, right? A lot of us are watching the Inside the Eyelid show. So I would suggest waiting until, the sun goes down and trying to see this comet in the evening for you to get a view of it. Comet NEOWISE, a very beautiful and interesting comet. Again, let me show you the view again that was taken by my daughter and her friend last night from near the New Paltz area. And you could see this comet basically like this, a little bit dimmer to the eye and quite evident with binoculars or a small telescope. Somebody asked me yesterday, when can we expect to see another bright comet like this? We can't tell. We don't know, because of the fact that we're not aware of comets in advance, except for periodic comets that we've seen before. We know that Halley's Comet, for example, will return in the year 2061. It will also be in the summertime. I don't know how many of you plan to be around in July or August of 2061. I'm not sure I'm going to make it, but that's the one bright comet that we know that will be headed our way in the future. But again, between now and 2061, there'll probably be other comets, maybe even a few better than NEOWISE, or maybe a bright, brilliant, great comet. But for the moment, at least, we have NEOWISE, and we have it to ourselves for at least another week or so before it begins to fade away. So again, take advantage of it. It's out there, and hopefully you'll all get a chance to see it. I'm just going to close the shutter of my camera here for the moment, and let me just get another view here and see how things are on our chat board. And I do see on our chat board, we do have a number of people here. Dennis Cassia, he is online, and he has taken some nice pictures. He's an amateur astronomer like I am for many, many years. We have Stephen Franco. We have Izzy D. We have Paul Roman and Toymaker Barry. All of you, thank you very much for tuning in. We're going to post this also on our YouTube channel, also on our Facebook channel too. And also, if you are not a subscriber to my YouTube channel, If you're not a subscriber to it, I hope that you do make an effort to subscribe. We talk about a number of different things, both astronomically as well as meteorologically. There you go. You didn't think you were going to see me, but here I am. And we will be talking more about the weather. Looks like a very significant spell of hot and humid weather is heading our way beginning this weekend and running through a good part of next week. And we'll be talking more about that later on this week as well. If you are not a subscriber to my YouTube channel, please subscribe. And if you are a subscriber already, please tell everybody to subscribe. There's nothing more we can ask of you. Subscribing to this channel will not cost you anything. And again, from time to time, we'll do some interesting stuff like this particular primer for viewing Comet NEOWISE in our nighttime sky. And again, also when we have active weather, we like to go online as well and talk more about that. So that is it for this afternoon. Thank you very much for coming. How long did we go? We went 35 minutes with this primer on Comet NEOWISE. And I hope you learned a lot about it, about the comet, how to look for it if you've not already seen it already, maybe how to take pictures of it as well. And if you want to, you could just already go back to the this video once it's posted and again, learn more about these vagabonds of the solar system, comets, which come from the outer reaches beyond our solar system. All right, thank you very, very much for watching, and we will be talking with you again sometime down the road. And don't forget to watch the Joe and Joe Show on Joe Chaffee's YouTube channel. That'll be tonight at 7 o'clock. We'll get together and talk more about weather and also perhaps talk more about Comet NEOWISE as well. So have a very pleasant afternoon. Thank you very much. And this is Joe Rayo signing off.